Well, here's another article on that business of how the DCEU was supposed to conclude, and it involves the approach to Flashpoint, and there are certainly elements established within Batman versus Superman and in Justice League, certainly with the Flash coming from the future to warn Bruce Wayne and all that sort of thing. And then the casting of Jeffrey Dean Morgan and Lauren Cohan, sorry, from Walking Dead, you know. Well, they're both from Walking Dead, or were anyway. Oh, well, they're going to have their own show now. I don't know. I gave up on Walking Dead a long time ago. It was good, then it wasn't. But the idea of them two playing the alternate universe versions of Batman and the Joker would have looked good. You know, you could have done that. And the idea is that a Flashpoint film would be the conclusion of the DCEU overall. Kind of, sort of where they end up, but very badly, as it's turned out, which... and the idea being it sets, just like what Flashpoint did in the comic books for the New 52, which didn't work out so great, but the idea for a cinematic universe deal would be that you basically got about 10 years for your stars to portray these characters throughout these films. And then you, using the comic book typical reboot shenanigans that have gone on in comic books for quite a while, you introduce your new cast. The characters remain. Is it really necessary? No, you could probably just do a satisfying film, rest it for a while, and then, oh, look, it's a new Superman film starring someone new, and that sort of thing. Could do that, and it's just the James Bond model for your characters, because Superman and Batman are going to continue on for, you know, I don't know, as long as civilization remains, which is somewhat in doubt. But anyway, more of the details of what the plan was comes once again from Jay Oliva, who was the storyboard artist on quite a few of Zack Snyder's films, and of course he was the director for the animated version of Flashpoint, and so it gives you a good idea of what could have happened, and a lot of those details, which really would have been cool, especially the Atlanteans versus the Amazons and that sort of thing. So he spoke to Inverse, and he says, originally there was supposed to be just Zack's 5 films and one side movie, which ended up being Suicide Squad. But after the success of Man of Steel, Warner decided to go all in on its cinematic universe. Rick's movie was going to be a series of films, just like Aquaman. I think all of those films they were planning to be trilogies. Now, Rick refers to, what's his name? Rick Fumiyaya? Well, I'm sorry, Rick. I'm getting your name wrong, and I apologize. But that was the original director signed on to do this. Rick's movie was laying the groundwork for Zoom. That's Professor Zoom and or Reverse Flash, but I think Zoom's the better name of the two. So I'm just going to go with Zoom. But he was the big baddie of the DC universe. He was the one, because he travels through time and all that, and he's manipulated these events to unfold as they did. So it was Professor Zoom pulling the strings, because he had come from the future to basically, F with Barry. In the Flash movie, Zoom would be the villain in the background, but also in the ancillary other films, you would see some of the influences of Zoom on the rest of the Justice League. At the ending of Zack's Darkseid quadrilogy or whatever, we would end up with a Justice League Unlimited version of the Snyderverse, Oliva says, of the popular 2000s the cartoon version. And then you flip it. You do Flashpoint Paradox. Everybody whose friends are now enemies, and it's a world you don't want to live in. You can reboot the universe and introduce a new cast that way. Because after 10 years, the actors need to go on to something else. That's the deal. That's the thinking. And it's probably what Marvel should have done at the end of Endgame. There were ways they could have continued. They'd established new characters that could stay on. I think they should have coalesced around Doctor Strange as their main character, the way Tony Stark was in their first run. and probably spend a lot more time on street level characters. Get Daredevil up and running a lot sooner than they have, and stuff like that. And Doctor Strange could involve more of the mystical and supernatural and horror elements of exploring their Marvel universe, and craft something out of that to move to their next level, where they, but ultimately probably better, is just reboot and start over with your new cast and do another take on it. But the idea was to keep it going, and they didn't have the material. I mean, they have decades of material, but they didn't know how to utilize it. And you see where it is now. Had DC done this and given a satisfying send-off of that cast, they'd be in much better shape than what they're in right now. So Aliva also offers that there were missed opportunities. That's the whole story of DCEU and all that, is, one missed opportunity after another. It says, being a part of it was so exciting, and then having to shift gears and pivot, it's kind of sad. I would have loved to have seen it get to this point. So, and of course, Cosmic Book News saying, hey, I heard similar things. And Jay Oliva has nothing but huge praise for Ben Affleck's Batman script that, just never happened. And apparently Walter Hamada and Jeff Johns, so they undermined Snyder and Chris Nolan. So it's unfortunate, again, that it happened that way, but it's at least a more cohesive map or plan. Now, other versions of this, especially what was supposed to have been Justice League 2, would have involved something of a Legion of Doom in leading up to Darkseid's invasion at the end, and then the third movie would involve the time travel and the nightmare vision and all that sort of stuff. But going through it, it's the other villains would show. So Lex Luthor, of course, is Superman's villain, and you see him in Batman versus Superman. And throughout the story, you would meet other villains, and I think Captain Cold was supposed to be one of the members of the team, if I recall correctly. And I would have thought they would have already done a Flash movie, and he would have been the main villain of it. Hints and teases about Zoom might have been in some of that had they planned this out well enough, because a Flashpoint movie that would be your third Flash movie, not your first, which is what they ended up doing. But in that aspect, then the leading up to the Darkseid confrontation, and you have Lex Luthor wanting to get the power of the anti-life equation and all that sort of stuff, and then he recruits the Riddler, who solves it, and it drives him insane, and he does himself in. That was part of the details of how that was gonna go, and so you had different villains from each of the Justice League superheroes. You had was her name Dr. Poison, something like that? The woman with the plastic mask in Wonder Woman's movie. And they would have it where she experimented on herself and kept herself alive all these years. But nevertheless, there you go. There's a villain for Wonder Woman who would show up. Of course, Black Manta would be Aquaman's villain, and so on. And there you go. And I guess the Riddler would round out for Batman's villains. And that's where it leads. But for Captain Cold to be there, I think it would have... granted, Batman doesn't... unless the Riddler played a part in some aspect or not, or made a cameo or something like that in Ben Affleck's Batman film, where he was going up against Deathstroke in that film as the main villain. But nevertheless, that way of establishing that, and then they come together into this Justice League thing, and that would be fine. And then after all that's done, then Zoom makes his move on Barry, and Flashpoint is the result, and that's the ending, and then you introduce your new cast. It's too bad, but at least it's a framework and an outline as things go. This would be over the course of 10 years. Unexpected things can happen and that sort of stuff, and you got to be able to be flexible about it. but at least there was a goal. Instead of just throwing everything up against the wall and panicking over not getting Marvel money at the outset. Well, again, that's what happened. But anyway, seems like a more cohesive idea rather than the mishmash of what you got, which for the most part wasn't that great.